paint more of the tree. So we'll use this warm mixture of raw sienna and crimson to paint these browns. But the other colour you're getting in these trunks, the paler colour, is a little bit more yellow. So all you want to do, again, instead of using just a damp brush to soften that colour, you pick up some diluted raw sienna and just keep swapping brushes. And if you swap brushes as you go, the two colours just melt together perfectly to produce the sort of soft structure you want. And if you want leaves in front of the tree, obviously leave the washes from behind showing, but with these darker colours up higher, actually, when you paint over the green, it also produces a convincing trunk or branch colour. So you don't have to worry too much. When you paint the greens, you can paint them right through the scene and let them show in some places, but paint over them in others. In the darker trees on the right, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to paint through these little gaps. Where you go between the bits of foliage, that's where you put your trunk. So as I come down into this holly tree, I just paint bits of brown down there.
Sorry.
There you go. So now we've got a darker tree over here. So I just chase that colour. I've just added a little bit of more cobalt blue, or some cobalt blue, to produce a darker trunk colour. And again, I'm just aiming for the spaces between the bits of green for the holly, so that you get the illusion of the trunk passing right between and right through the other colours. So you just use two brushes and chase them, and even then you can slightly strengthen the colour. But be careful when you introduce a blue, you don't go too blue. If you want to do it more naturalistic, is this too much blue? It could be, it could be a bit too blue, but I can always put a little bit of crimson into it to deepen it and change its colour. So you're painting, it's like weaving, you're just painting through these spaces, leaving the greens, keep going through the spaces, and then ultimately you'll get your tree connecting up the gaps. So you see what's happening? You've got a bit of brown there, then I chase it with a bit of blue. Or if I was catching a light, I chase it with just water on a brush. So you eventually get the structure of the tree carrying on right through. And again, be careful with these trees further back, not to make them so strong that they detract from the central, the foremost tree. But remember, with these brushes, if you're careful, especially if you're standing like I am, you can just use the tip of the brush to produce the thinnest twiggy branches like this, and then you can press harder, such as in this trunk down here, to produce the thickness of the whole trunk just by pressing the brush closer. So again, I'm just topping up the brush now and then and carrying on. I'm leaving a bit of light showing here. This tree trunk's got some sunlight coming through, and again I can just work higher up. But be very careful when you go higher with a brush like this. If you press too hard in the wrong place, you'll suddenly get a lump of paint where you don't want it. So just be careful to keep your distance. I'm holding the brush, by the way, right near the ends. I'm using my arm to paint, and it's actually easier when you stand back from your painting like this. So if you're sitting at a table with it flat, I would suggest you put the board up either on your lap against the table and lean back from it, or put it upright on a table easel, so you can do this from a distance. And you can get a nice, retain that flowing structure you want by painting with your whole arm rather than just your wrist and moving it at the end. So again, I can go back and I can add other shades to this. So I'm getting colder colours, I'm getting warmer colours, colder with more blue, almost going green in some areas, warm with more red, trying to leave some light patches. And then, of course, you can always go back with a second application if you've got strong shadows. So I've done this trunk over here, and I'm going to go over that trunk with, this is a slightly bluey mix. I'm going to add a slightly browny mix to that and get a stronger shadow on the left of that trunk going up there. If it's too hard, just take a second brush, or in this instance, because I've got two colours on the go, a third brush, just with water on it. And you have to do this within only seconds. 30. Well, it's already starting to dry on me, so you have to be very quick to soften the edge like that. But it means you don't have to keep mixing different shades in your palette, because effectively you're going to put different shades on with your brush by adding more water. There's a branch, a very thin silvery branch that reaches right across and links the composition up here. I've drawn it in. In the first instance, I tissued back some little gaps in it from the sky so it would stand up white. But now, as I link it together, it joins the whole painting up. But I'm using this bluey, or slightly more bluey grey in this branch. And then I'll go underneath it with a slightly stronger dark. If you look at the photograph, our source photograph, it's got... it's a pale colour, but the underneath of the branch has got some dark in it. And in fact, the branch, as it comes out of the trunk, the left side of it's got more dark on it. So just look at the moulding and modelling of the branches as well. And there's a thin one that comes right over down into this section. So sometimes you paint over the greens where branches in front of it, but other times you thread it through the greens, depending on whether it's part of those greens or not. So just going in, strengthening up the colour slightly, and just painting the bottom edge of it a little bit darker, and then the left edge of it here a bit darker, and then chasing it with my third brush in this instance. I'm going to go in very carefully here, so I'm holding my brush. I've actually got my finger on the paper, so I can go in really accurately and just model that shadow colour into the branch. Make it look rounded. So occasionally you want to get in close and just check, get it really accurate. But it builds up that way with the cold colours, the warm colours and the detail. And ultimately I won't do all of the branches, but I will just put one stronger shadow in. As we come down low, we get these really deep shadows. And so this is a brown that I've mixed by using my crimson and raw sienna, adding cobalt blue. I need a bit more crimson actually. So you could use cadmium for this because we're going much darker. In fact, there's lots of different ways you could get to this dark colour. But crimson and raw sienna is a nice combination because both of them are transparent colours. So as I'm trying to imitate a watercolour technique with acrylic paint, it means that I've got these dark shadowy colours, but they're not too dense and opaque. So now I can come in with these really dark colours on top. And in fact, this branch has got a very strong dark. Now, if it's looking a tiny bit opaque. So what I do, as you can probably anticipate, is get brush number 3, the damp brush, not too wet, and I just soften that in. So don't rush ahead with each colour when you're doing this. Stop every few inches you're painting, I suppose, and just go back if you need to soften. Do it sooner rather than later, so you can get your colours to meld in together and retain the transparency. And I'm now just adding a little bit more blue as I go down lower. The shadows seem to increase, so I'm going a bit bluer. Just testing my colour, very strong in here. And again, it's probably slightly too strong a mixture on the brush, so I'm just getting my wet brush to soften it slightly. Go back to my blue. Don't use a vivid blue like phthalo blue for this because it really will be too intense. You don't want to actually see blue, you just want the blue to darken the browns. And so we can get the deeper shades in and then soften them in. So you can see that it's starting to take on a shape. And in fact, there's a cool branch here. I'll just put it next to those shadows because it's a greeny mix. I'm actually going to take the green mix I used for making my leaf colour and put it into my brown. So this is actually a very pale green from the first stage of the painting. But there's a greeny brown branch coming down here. And again, picking up on these different shades, and hues, different tints, you'll get much more interest into the study. and there's bits of green here. And also remember that tree trunks in the woods like this often have moss and so on, so you might have a lovely warm bark colour, but then it's got a very pale green where there's moss or lichen, which produces a nice contrast. So we're getting warm colours, cold colours, dark colours, pale colours, trying to give it all structure. Plenty more to do, but at least that's the process you can adopt.